In this video, let's take a look at the evolution of the Phase 2 Clone Trooper mold. I think at this point I have at least one of most samples. I'm sure there might be a few here and there I'm missing, but these are generally the main ones that we've seen over the years, going all the way back to the Revenge of the Sith line, all the way to the newest one right here that I do have reviewed on channel, if you want to check that out. But we've gotten a lot of great Phase 2 clone sculpts over the years. Most of them are pretty similar, but there are some slight differences here and there with various figures that you see here. And they all got something great about them, and they all have maybe a few weaknesses here and there. Overall, they're really good, and I don't think Hasbro's ever really made a bad Phase 2 Clone Trooper sculpt. Of course, there could be some improvements here and there, like the visor on this guy. But overall, they're really nice, and I'm glad to have most of these. Or all of these, I should say. But let's just go ahead and start from the beginning here with the quick draw attack clone. So this is actually the very first Revenge of the Sith action figure I got at the time. It was before the movie came out, shortly after the line debuted, which I think was in April of 2005. And I recall going into Walmart, they had a huge display set up in the very front of the store, and they had, of course, a whole lot of Episode 3 action figures. And this was as soon as you walked in. And then if you went down just a little bit further, there was another display. And then if you went all the way back to the toy aisle, there was another display. So you probably had the equivalent, maybe 2 or 3 aisles of Star Wars action figures. They were only $5.88 at the time. It's incredible looking back at that. I wish I had it all on video where I could upload it to YouTube right now and then show everybody exactly how it was at the time, if you weren't collecting or if you're not too sure what I was talking about. But little did we know at that time that we were pretty much in the golden age of Star Wars action figure collecting, and you could find just about any figure you want. At the time, the Revenge of the Sith the action figure line had maybe a grand total of 60 action figures. They weren't all released at once, but over time, you could probably find all 60 of them at retail, no problem. Even the later action figures, I don't think there was ever a time where there was an action figure I wanted and then I didn't find it at retail. Nowadays, there's an action figure you want and you'll never see it at retail. And they were only a fraction of the price that, I mean, look at it. This clone here is $16.99 and then this one was $5.88. I mean, what happened here, you know? It's incredible. This quick draw attack clone was a good start. Oh, in addition to this guy, I got General Grievous with it. But I will admit, this is not the original one I owned at the time. I actually don't have that action figure anymore, so I had to reacquire one years later. So between the clone and General Grievous, those were the first 2 Revenge of the Sith figures I got. And then it was Anakin and Obi-Wan and the Magna Guard after that as well. But he's slightly different from the antenna mold that we'll take a look at here next. Some of the biggest differences is obviously he has the action feature about him where he can do this. You just squeeze his legs. And a lot of people don't like that. They say it's gimmicky, and I can understand that. I'm not a big fan of action features as well, but at least for this guy, they're well hidden. You can barely tell he's got an action feature at all. And he's still fairly affordable to this day. You could probably easily find him in the $5 to $10 range if you look in the right places. And he also does have a variant release of the Shock Trooper, which I'll show in a different video at some point. And that one's pretty easy to get a hold of as well if you're wanting to load up on some Shock Troopers for your collection. The quick draw attack Shock Trooper is a great contender to go after. Even probably more so than the antenna mold. But what else is different about him? He doesn't have a swivel waist or any waist of articulation of any kind. And you can take his one shoulder pad off here, and you can put another one on there that has a Republic symbol. Not sure why they did that, but it stays in the place just fine, and it's not that big of a deal. Other than that, it's pretty much the same exact action figure. As you can see here, you can't really tell a huge difference between the two. Of course, he doesn't have the antenna. His back is more on the flatter side. Yeah. But yeah, that's the quick draw attack clone. Like I said, he's pretty easy to get a hold of, so if you want one, or if you're looking to start clone trooper collecting, this is definitely a great contender for our first one. Then we move on to the antenna mold here, which was released a little bit further along in the Revenge of the Sith line. Yes, I know this isn't the exact figure. This is the Mandalorian clone trooper that came with the Republic Elite Forces pack in the 30th anniversary line. And that's because I don't have the plain white antenna mold of the Phase 2 clone. So this is the closest one I got to it. But the same exact action figure, except for the skull there. But we all know about the antenna mold at this point. It's a solid action figure, and for a lot of people, it's their favorite clone trooper sculpt to this day. It's my personal favorite sculpt. I really liked it. I liked it at the time, and I think it's held up really good over the years, and it's a contender with this one, even with the newest ones. The proportions are right on it. No, it doesn't have the removable helmet, so the helmet is more proportioned and more shaped right. It looks really good. Other than the quick draw attack clone, he has the articulated waist, and of course he doesn't have the action features about him. And you can take the antenna out. And they usually stay in the place pretty good. At this point, if I had to load up on much more clones, I think at this point going forward is pretty much going to be antenna mold clones. I'm not really going to be loading up on clones so much anymore, other than getting one or two here and there, and at least one or two samples of sculpts that I'm missing or variants I'm missing at this point. But I got too many clones at this point, or I'm happy with all the clones I have, but it's getting to the point where it's starting to get a little difficult to manage, so I kind of want to scale back a little bit and just maintain what I have. I don't want to start getting to the point where I start forgetting what action figures I have for my collection, and I'm not there yet, and I could probably go through and recite every action figure I have in my collection at this point, but I don't want to get to the point where it's so blown up where I forget what I have. And I'm happy with what I do have at this point. I think I have a grand army of the Republic that I'm proud of, and I wouldn't wish it any different. But as far as affordability for a lot of these antenna mold clones, this one's usually not very affordable. You might be able to find them like $20 loose. But there's so many different antenna mold variants out there, so you're bound to find something that's affordable in like the $10 range or less. Now, believe it or not, the plain white Phase 2 clone, part of the reason why I don't have him is because he's just not very easy to come by, and every time I get on eBay to look for one, people end up charging like $25, $30 for one, and I just don't think that's worth it. The 501st one I see go up in that range as well. Shock Troopers I don't really look at so much because I got plenty of those. But just do some research and you never know what you might find. Even if you want one brand new, there should be at least a few on there you can find. That's the antenna mold clone. Then also in the Revenge of the Sith line, we got a couple of this other slightly modified clone trooper sculpt. This one's the Shadow Utapau clone trooper, which is pretty much the same exact thing as those two. The only difference is the head articulation is slightly different, or at least the ball that his head is on is slightly different, a little bit shorter. I don't know if you can notice there, but it's a very very small difference. And in addition to this clone trooper, the not this particular one, but one similar to it, the 91st Reconnaissance clone also came in this sculpt as well. And I think there may have been a few others. Maybe the Covert Ops one did as well. I don't have the Covert Ops one, but it is high on my list to get at some point. But when I do get one, I'll be sure to compare the two and let you know. This 91st Reconnaissance clone here is actually the mystery clone that it's often referred to as, where it's in the antenna mold sculpt and it shows up every now and then on eBay from like Tongori, and nobody knows where it comes from, if it's even an official Hasbro action figure or if it was a canceled action figure. I'm kind of leaning more towards the side of maybe it was a canceled action figure at one point, or maybe someone just took it upon themselves to start printing a bunch of antenna molds, Salocomai 91st Reconnaissance clones. It could be any of those. I don't think it's a bootleg per se, but who knows? Maybe we'll never know the answer to that. I just included this one here because I wanted to use as reference that the Salocomai clone here also came in this sculpt. And like I said, it's pretty much the same as these two. I do think the joints feel a little more loose on it compared to these, and that could be just my sample, but the plastic kind of does feel slightly different, so who knows. And because he has a little bit of a shorter stump his head sits on, and basically next to no neck, his head doesn't really rotate around so much. It's about the most movement you're really going to get out of it. Not that big of a deal though. But still, that is a slightly different variant of a Phase 2 clone trooper. As far as I know, after that, we kind of lead into the more modern lines. So the reason why I include this 327 Star Corps is he's kind of basically the clone commander mold that we saw in the 30th anniversary line and several other clone sculpts as well. I think like Commander Vil and Commander Thorn and Commander Thyre all use this sculpt as well. And I'm not sure exactly the order that they all came out in. I think the 41st Elite Coruscant landing platform clone commander that was just released as a generic clone commander in the 30th anniversary line, I think that may have been the first one that really utilized this sculpt. And I have that action figure as well. It's a really nice one. It's really no different than, say, this one, or it's kind of a combination of the antenna mold and this one, I'll say. But it's a nice sculpt. Really like it. And for the 327th here, it's a nice clone trooper to have as well. I've had this one since back in the day, in 2009 I think is when he came out. I think mine's starting to get a little yellow there. This light box here, you start seeing a lot of the yellowing on your action figures more being under this light, and noticing things I didn't really notice before. Like on this Mandalorian clone here, I didn't really realize he was yellowing up as well. Can't really do much about it. In some ways I'm not really that bothered by it as long as he doesn't get like really yellow. Well, a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. To me, it just shows that the action figure is authentically mine and it's been a part of my life for a really long time. And most of these have here. I've had this 327th clone for about 14 years now. So then after that, we kind of got a little bit more of a limited run of this clone sculpt. And I've reviewed this one on my channel as well. This was VC15, but prior to that, he was used as a 327th Star Corps clone as well. And he came with the, what was that? That creature that they ride on Felucia. I always forget what the name of it is. But that sculpt was used for this. And biggest thing about that is the hinge tips. Other than that, it's pretty much the same clone that we've been getting. Combination of the antenna mold, combination of this clone commander mold as well, at least for the head and helmet that is. But other than that, other than those two features, there isn't a whole lot else to say about it. And it didn't get used very much. He was also used for the 212 clone. And I do have that one as well. Other than those three, I can't think of what else he was used for. Like I said, he was only around for a brief amount of time, like towards the end of the Legacy Collection, the very beginning of the TVC line. So you probably had a release of only maybe a grand total of a year and a half. Not too many Clone Trooper sculpts we got of him. There may be others out there, but if there is, they're not the more common ones, and I can't think of what they are at this point. But those are the three main ones, that is. 327th with the creature they ride on Felucia. It was a battle pack towards the end of the Legacy Collection. This one here, VC-15, and then also the 212. And then shortly after this one, it's when we got this very common Clone Trooper sculpt that we've seen so many releases of, and it's been around for 11 years at this point, and it's finally been retired. Who knows if we've seen the total end of it? I have this feeling we haven't. I think at some point Hasbro is going to bring it out again and use it for a particular Clone Trooper sculpt. Technically, that is the case with Captain Hauser being re-released. It still is going to be around for a little while longer. And I mentioned with the Phase 1 clones that I reviewed previously with the Sergeant, I hope at some point Hasbro does finish in that sculpt with the Clone Captain and the Clone Commander with the yellow stripes as well. Even if it is an outdated sculpt at this point, I think those action figures deserve justice to be completed. They were supposed to be back in 2013 in those Jedi battle packs that came with the Commander Pons, that came with the older clone sculpt. For whatever reason, Hasbro did a last minute running change, I suppose, and canceled utilizing this clone sculpt for those packs. So hopefully at some point we get those. But I've talked about this sculpt so many times at this point. You can go back and look at my other Clone Trooper reviews if you want to know more about it. But it's a nice sculpt. Is it the best? I don't think so. Like I've said numerous times, I think the antenna mold deserves that spot. But still, it's a nice sculpt. I'm glad to have it. And that's really all I can say about it at this point. It's had its day in the sun. And of course now we're down to this brand new one. And is it the next phase of Clone Trooper collecting? I would say it is. Unfortunately though, it's a $16.99 action figure. And I don't know about you, but I like clones a lot as well. But $17 per clone I think is getting a little excessive. And then if you want army build these, it's going to cost you about $100 after all the shipping and taxes and everything, because you know you can't find these action figures in stores. Just for 4 clones. And then we've seen the 212th pack, or the Troop Builder pack that has Waxer recently, and Hasbro is asking like $70 for that pack, which I think is outrageous. At this point I don't have the pack. Perhaps I'll get it at some point. I was actually not going to get it at all because I didn't want the Clone Wars helmet sculpt without the black line, and I didn't want to start making my realistic clones look like Clone Wars clones. So I was like, I'm not going to bother getting it. And if I get a Waxer anyway, I'd rather go get the Clone Wars animated Waxer that we got back in the day, which is a pretty expensive action figure at this point and not too easy to come by. But now that I know they are doing a running change of that, where it does have the black line, so perhaps I'll get it at some point. But as of right now, there's not a dire need for me to get that. But yeah, I've done the review on that, so if you want to check that video out and see what I'm talking about with this Clone Trooper, please do. But it's a pretty nice sculpt overall, and other than fixing the visor, I think it is worthy successor to the Clone Trooper Evolution. But other than that, I think that's all I can really tell you for now about these Clone Trooper sculpts. I think they're all fantastic sculpts. I can't say one's bad or one's significantly better than the other. It's all just down to your personal preference of what you prefer. And in my case, it's the Nintendo mold. I'm glad to own each and every single one of these, and they're all really nice. Suppose I will include this 501st clone here with really nicely articulated hips. It's a slightly different sculpt that we've gotten over the years. And I've talked about this clone so many times on the channel as well if you want to check that out. But again, basically the same thing as the rest of them. So really not much more I can say about that other than to this day it's still some of the best leg articulation I've ever seen on a action figure, and just beyond a Clone Trooper action figure even. But yeah, that's all I'm going to really say at this time. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for lots more in the future. I love doing these comparison videos because it gives me a chance to take a look at the collection I have and just see what I have checked off and what I still need to get. And it's a good way to compare what we do have out there for various characters and action figures. So stay tuned for plenty more of those in the future. And if you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate all your support. And check out some of the links in the description as well. Thanks for watching.